Welcome everyone to RedShelf Connections morning focus event for today, April 23rd. My name is Steve Mendez. I'm in marketing at RedShelf, and our morning focus program is bringing you insights you can use during your day today. It is one of 4 programs in the RedShelf Connections series, which aims to bring you new ideas, professional development opportunities, and help strengthen our networks. So that we can help you achieve your vision of course materials delivery on campus. You can sign up for upcoming events at about.redshelf.com/connections, and that site also has links to our recordings on our YouTube playlist. Today we are really excited to welcome Dr. Jennifer Thompson, a business psychologist and professor at the Chicago School of Professional Psychology. She's bringing us guidance on leveraging neuroscience-related techniques to support emotional resilience and positive emotions for leaders and staff, even during these challenging times. Before we pass it over to Jennifer, there's a few housekeeping items I'll just mention. We are recording this session, so we invite you to keep your cameras on if you're comfortable doing so, or if you'd rather not be in the recording that's released on YouTube, you can turn your camera off. You should be muted. If you are not muted, please mute your microphone during the presentation. We will have time for Q&A at the end where you can unmute if you need to. During the presentation, please use the chat feature in Zoom to put your questions in, and we will address those either during the presentation or during the Q&A. Any questions we don't get to, I'll follow up with Jennifer afterwards, and we'll then follow up with you. So with that, a little bit more about Jennifer Thompson has combined her career as a business psychologist with the newest field of positive psychology and its effect on organizations and individuals. She's an expert in statistics and research methodology. She measures unseen phenomena in organizations and their effects on company culture. She has a PhD in industrial and organizational psychology and a certification in positive psychology, and brings together a strong scientific background paired with the latest research on emotions and motivation to generate a powerful result. Jennifer has been a professor in business psychology at the Chicago School for over 15 years. She has experience in the airline, technology, and healthcare industries. So with that, I'm going to stop my sharing and invite Jennifer to share her screen and begin. Welcome, Jennifer. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much. Let me just get my screen on, share my screen. Start there. Great, can you see it?
We can.
Wait, let me get to presentation mode though.
Okay.
There we go, is that better?
Great, looks great.
Okay, great. Thank you. Welcome to this, and thank you so much. I wanna thank Dina Shank. It's wonderful to reconnect, and thank you, Steve, for all the help in setting this up. And you did a great introduction, so I won't need to go too much into this, but basically I really believe in a positive organizational culture, and that's because it brings us all of these things: engagement, resilience, performance, and you can have this magnetic culture that attracts people and retains people, which is a huge cost if you don't. And these are some of the ways that we train people to bring about a positive culture. And what I'm going to share with you today is similar to the trainings in that everything that we do is science-based. So we know that these interventions work. We know they work in the workplace. And it's the combination of business psychology, neuropsychology, and positive psychology. And my own specialty is psychological capital, and that is the motivational propensity to achieve your goals. And it's made up of hope, self-efficacy, resilience, and optimism. And I'm going to share a little bit about that today, as well as some other things. So today, I want to give you 3 quick tools that you can use in this current environment, which is connection, positive emotions, and intentional actions. So before we start, I just want to acknowledge where we are. I think it's a bit sugary coated to just say, okay, let's use positive emotions. And that's not where we are right now. And I want to acknowledge that. And I want to start off by talking about, there's three main states to our brain. And the very lowest, the least, it's been around the longest, is our survival state. And the main question we're asking here is, am I safe? And normally, under normal circumstances, I'm helping people at work see you're not in danger. Every stress is not a danger. But now we are actually in a spot where there is danger, and there's danger all around us. And what's more insidious is that it's invisible, right? And we don't know, we don't have this information. So I think it's really important for us to say, hey, I'm in a survival state, and that's okay, and that's where I should be at this moment. And as we move up the brain, we come to the emotional state and the emotional level. And here we're asking, am I loved? You know, am I cared for? And the last state we have, the most recent state, is the executive state. And here's where we can learn and function in a high functioning manner. Now, what's important to understand is that if you're in the survival state or you're in the emotional state, you can't get to learning, right? And this is important if you have staff. If they're in a survival state, it's hard, it's difficult, almost impossible from a neuroscience perspective to learn. So that's something that I really want us to think about and consider. And so how do we get out of the survival state, and call it taming the survival state? One big piece is just to recognize you are there and say this is normal. So I think trying to fight against that and trying to be your normal self in a not normal time. You know, I frequently see people say, like, I used to find reading pleasurable, and they're not in this moment. And this would be why, because this state of the brain is activated. So a way to tame it is to separate what you can control and what you can't control. And there's a lot outside our control. And the problem is when you start worrying about what's outside of your control, what other people are doing, the economy, what's happening just in a vague general future sense, you become inactive. You become paralyzed by fear and you don't take action. What can help you here is think about what you're in control of, washing your hands, wearing a mask, and focusing on those things. At work, what you're in control of, focus on those things. Now, that's a very cerebral way to look at how to calm yourself down, you know, think about it. In this moment, sometimes we can't even get to the cerebral part because we're just in a panic. And the quickest way to get out of that would be there's a number of breathing techniques. This one's my favorite, and it's a 10-second breath cycle over a minute or two, where you're breathing in for 5 and out for 5, or in for 4 and out for 6. It doesn't really matter, but you're just doing that, you know, where you're taking one breath in and out for 10 seconds over an entire minute or over 2 minutes. And that will reset your parasympathetic nervous system. It will take you out of that fight-flight state that you're in and put you in a rest state. So that is a really good tool to always use. You can use it to go to sleep if you're having trouble sleeping. Use it in a variety of ways. The last point about taming the survival state is being kind and gracious to yourself first. I hear a lot of, I'm not able to do this, I can't do this, I used to be able to do this. Being kind and gracious that you're in a different state and you are doing the best you can. And if you really focus on being kind to yourself, that's going to spill out to others as well. Also realizing you're cooped up in a house with your own situation, you won't always be kind, right? Forgiving yourself and moving on. So kind of recognizing that wasn't kind, that's okay, move back to kind. But especially being kind to yourself. So taming the emotional state is all about human connection. And here's where we're really at a disadvantage. We're at a disadvantage because we need eye contact and human interaction to feed the chemicals in our brain to feel good. So this social interaction is what it is called life-giving nutrients. And what happens is when we talk to another person, we get eye contact. When we do mirroring, where we mirror their facial expression so we understand how they feel. And the syncing, and actually syncing of hormones with other people is a really good feeling, and it reassures us, and it helps us survive, really. And this is cut off from us now, and so video and whoever's in home is the best way to do this. But really realizing that love comes through micro moments. So we're used to smiling at the mailman, asking the person at the CTA stall, you know, how's your day? We have all these little micro moments of connection, and those feed us. And so how can we get them in the state that we're in? But if you're feeling blue, this is a good reason why. Okay. So positive emotions are one of the things that can help us, and it's important to everything we do. And there's something called the vagus nerve, and it runs from our head to almost all of our organs. And positive emotions help keep this vagus nerve in shape. And the vagal tone that comes from the vagus nerve is one key indicator of our overall health. And what we know through research is positive emotions increase our vagal tone. And so we want to be increasing the positive emotions. And they say the ratio is about 3-to-1 roughly. 3 positive emotions to 1 negative emotion. So I know everyone knows they feel good. It's good to have positive emotions, but sometimes we don't understand how it's important at work. And research has shown that people who have high positive emotions are correlated to, like in their job more, being more positively evaluated. They're able to buffer a managerial position better. And people who have low positive emotions are more likely to be absent, turn over, have burnout and conflict. So you can see in this moment where burnout and conflict and all of these things are happening at an exponential rate, that positive emotions can really be this buffer. So that's one tool, and I'll tell you a little bit more about how to do that. So the research that's done around this shows that when you have more positive emotions, your physiological system opens up, your eyes open up, you see more, you're open to more, and therefore you see more opportunities and you grab more opportunities, then you get more resources, then you're happier. So it fulfills this cycle and you have this upward spiral. In the same manner, when you have negative emotions, your eyesight narrows and your options narrow, and everything physiologically narrows for you, and you're not able to see the solution in front of your face. So the more that you can build positive emotions, the more it broadens you and the more it builds your resources. So you may say, that's great. Yeah, positive emotions are great. It's really difficult now. How much control do I have over that? And the good news is it's about 40%. 50% comes from your genetics, which is what I refer to as like a trait happiness. You know, you have a propensity to have positive emotions, you know, so you have a genetic one. But we really give so much weight to our circumstances. And what the research has shown is that you get married, you graduate, you become paralyzed, you win the lottery, your states of happiness go right back to where they were 6 months prior. So we have this tendency to come back. But 40% of it we can actually change and boost up in a more permanent fashion with what we call intentional activities. And here are the 12 intentional activities. And Steve, I don't know if you're able, I sent you a link on an email. We could post the link in the chat, but I also have this QR code if anyone has a phone, if they want to do that. I have something on my website that talks about how to use these 12 intentional activities at work, right? But today I'm just going to pick 3, and I'm going to talk about it in this more specific COVID environment. So the first intentional activity is nurturing social relationships. And I already explained about connection and why that's so important. And we have a lot of research that backs it up. But how you can do it, there's several different ways. And I want to acknowledge here, we're all in a different situation. So some people are sheltering in place at home by themselves, and isolation and loneliness is a very big deal. Some of us are sheltering at home with kids and a job, and you're getting plenty of social stimulation, more than you want, perhaps. And then some of us are in situations where we're worried or in grief about a loved one or a business that may be in jeopardy, or you're basically worried about losing something. And so when you think about nurturing your social relationships, you can do it in different ways. The isolated one is very easy in terms of reaching out. So where are you getting your eye contact? Where are you getting a synchrony of mirroring neurons with another human and increasing that in your schedule if you don't have a lot of it? For those of you that have a lot, it may be coming and you may be feeling so overwhelmed, but you might be getting a lot of contact, but not having quality contact. So for example, if you're at home with your kids, how much eye contact and genuine joy and connection are you having with the kids, right? So instead of it being a chore, this could really be a recharge time for you. And then the last one, we're worried, networking with people who are in similar situations, being able to talk about it with someone who's going to understand. And this is also going to bring in some other resources where you are hearing how other people are coping with it and finding out what maybe alternate pathways they're taking. But the key here is really sensing that empathy with another human being and feeling a deep emotion and connecting. And there we go. So the next one is coping in resilience. And I think this is just perfect. This is right smack dab in the middle of what we all are. And I normally talk about gratitude, but everyone seems to be grateful in this situation. That seems to be coming naturally. Something we can work on is building up our resilience. And one important way to do that is noticing when you're regulated and when you're not regulated. And we're all going to be dysregulated at some points and many points in the situation, but regulating yourself first. And that goes back to the breathing technique that I talked about. So when you're realizing you're not regulated, first breathing, getting back in sync, getting your parasympathetic system kicked in and getting out of the fight and flight. Next, what gets in the way of coping resilience are inaccurate beliefs. So if you're saying to yourself, I should be doing this, this never happened to me before, any of these shoulds, woulds, never, always, that's a pretty big indicator you're on some inaccurate beliefs, right? And we're all going to have them, but just recognizing that's inaccurate. For example, I think this is a big one I'm hearing a lot about, like, I'm never going to lose weight, I have lost weight before. Right now is a difficult time. Maybe this isn't the time to focus on that. Maybe there's other things I want to focus on. But realizing that you're never, you're always, or your shoulds, it's just not true. Then the third thing is really bringing in hope, which is kind of sneaking in another one. But when you're encountering an obstacle and having trouble, generating some alternate pathways. So really, what other ways can you do it? And I can share some in the comments about how I've done some of these if you if you're interested in some personal experiences. But the key here is really starting to understand our self-talk, how we're talking to ourselves. If, one I mentioned earlier, is it kind? Are you talking to yourself in a kind way? Two, are you using these never, should, would, replace it with, I've got this. I can do this. So just replacing your self-talk with that, that's a really good way to boost your resilience. And I know these seem really easy or cliche, but literally saying that to yourself will change the way you think about yourself. So the last one here, and I hope I'm good on time, Steve, is...
Yeah, we're doing good.
Good. The last one is increasing optimism. And this one is so important. And optimism is it's our belief about the future. And do we have some hopes and dreams for the future? And a lot of them could be being crushed right now in this certain situation. And I think the key to it is looking past the next 6 months, the next year, but looking, 2-5 years out and saying, okay, if all of this happens, what can I expect for the best for me in the future, right? So, and 1 to 5 years, if everything turns out your way, what would it look like? And this exercise is a little more involved, and it's where you freeform write as many details as you can. It's great to do it 20 minutes a day for 4 days in a row, but really imagining what your best life could look like and writing that out and getting that vision is going to be instrumental in directing your activity towards that. But if you're not thinking about what would be the best for you, there's no way to get there. So this is writing a roadmap for yourself. Okay, so how do you apply all this to staff? For those of you that are leaders and working with people, connection is important. I'm really lucky. I have a great boss, always checking in, checking on how I'm feeling, checking on how I'm doing in a genuine way. Unfortunately, I saw some articles last night about that some companies are using technology to check in on their employees and really, what are they doing? They're worried about them being at home. And I would say, trust is an important factor here. And bringing those positive emotions in and helping people feel seen and heard and supporting them is going to go a lot. It's going to really push you towards high performance versus checking on them, right? That's a very negative emotion. There's some judgment in there. Like, I don't think you can handle yourself. I don't think you're doing what you're supposed to do. And that's going to really turn people off, right? So the opposite of that is, what can you do to help them feel seen and heard? Just check-in calls, seeing how they are. The second thing is, how can you increase positive emotions in yourself and your interactions with your staff? So I'm sure you're doing lots of video conferences. You can look at my website and see some ways to do it. I'm experiencing a lot of gratitude from my work at this moment. But making sure that you're doing that with your staff. It's not, hey, I'm thankful everybody for what you did, but very specific. Steve, thank you so much for helping me set this up and walking me through the technology. That made me feel great, right? Much more specific than just a general thanks. So in those meetings, you can really boost some positive emotion, give people some of the connection. And I've noticed on my team meetings, just seeing everybody on the camera, and it's like, oh, hey, it's great, and seeing face and kind of getting an idea of how they're doing feels good.
We actually, Jennifer, just had a question come through chat on that about specifically the remote work environment and not being in the office every day. Are there any other specific ways that it impacts negative emotion that you've seen tools maybe become more prevalent for, beyond even Zoom or anything like that?
Well, I think what's important is the eye contact, right? And where we get into trouble is we get on Facebook or Instagram and we think we're connecting with people, and we are in a way, but we're physically kind of hunched over and we're looking at our phone, which sends a depressive signal to our brain, right? We're like this, which is a very like sad, worrisome state. And so you want to avoid that, but realizing that maybe when you think you're connecting, you're not. And it takes eye contact and it takes this interaction in order to get that boost, right? And sometimes I'm looking at a post and I'm smiling and I'm thinking a positive thought about that person, and that's good and helpful too. But just realizing that you need, I really think the best we can do now is you need that video.
Yeah, that's interesting that the eye contact becomes such an important piece.
Right. And this isn't in this presentation, but you know, since the inventions of these smartphones, depression has skyrocketed. There's a reason. We're physically telling our bodies to be depressed. And we think we're connecting and we're just missing everything around us, right? And we're missing the things that really help our system regulate and stay positive. Okay, so some intentional actions. How can you help staff nurture connections between each other? So even without you, what can you do to help them connect, right? So possibly eye contact, video contact, asking if there's cameras, right? And I know sometimes people, I don't want a camera on, but that could be something important. The other thing is, if you feel your staff, they're getting stuck or they're getting down, helping them with alternate pathways and also helping identify inaccurate beliefs. So if they're experiencing something and you can see they're down and they're feeling stuck, you know, you don't want to just gloss over it with positive emotions. That's not helpful. You can reach back to a time when they were successful with something and say, hey, remember, you were successful with this. And this is tough. How else could we get there? So really kind of bringing in that creativity and looking for alternate pathways. I think that's the biggest tool. In my own quest to do my work at home, I am just running into roadblock after roadblock with small children in the house. And I lay in the bed at night and I'm like, that was such a failure. That just did not go the way I wanted it to. And I'm like, okay, so I tried this way. What's another way I could try? Right? What's another way I could try? I think I'm on like version 10 of my plan of working at home, right? I just keep coming up with different ways, and that helps keep me positive. And also I don't get stuck and start feeling like a failure. I'm just constantly moving and keeping it. And believe me, I mean, I have the days where we're having those very sad emotions, very blue days, because I am missing connecting with people. But also just kind of keeping it flexible and keeping my thinking flexible with alternate pathways. And the last thing is, you can ask your staff to write the best outcome for your department, for their job. You could ask them to write something that keeps them focused on the future in a far enough way point that they can see, hey, we are going to get out of this, and there is a future. So with that, I want to open it up to questions. I'd love to talk more about, or anything I've talked about, or anything different as well.
We have a couple minutes now for Q&A. If anyone wants to unmute and ask their question, that's fine. One of your points that I found interesting, Jennifer, was about the impact of inaccurate beliefs. And we had one question come in the registration process about tips for understanding the truth of what we're going through right now, and all these different inputs of information. The statement was that there are 360 degrees from true to false. And how do they impact your inaccurate beliefs, or how do you manage through that information to get to what is the truth for you, and to sort of hack your brain to that happy point and not let negative stuff affect you?
Yeah. Um, this is a really tough question and a really good one, a really good one. So I see a lot of stuff out there about people who like don't want to trust the news, don't know what to, um, and this is my personal view, is you listen to the health experts. Germany's doing really well, and their leader, Angela Merkel, is a scientist, right? So I think she's taking a very scientific approach. And I think it's important to, in this point, I love science, focus on the science and what the scientists are saying. And just as a personal example, when they were saying no face masks, I was like, and I just was reading, and I was reading researchers' articles, like researchers' blogs. And that convinced me I do need to be wearing a mask if I leave the house, right? So I think there's a lot of research out there that you can get to. Unfortunately, there's also some doctors, very popular doctors, peddling unscientific views. So it is really difficult. And what I do is I maybe look at the news once a week. I mean, I see the news on like my phone or on feeds, but like I don't watch the news. One, I have small children around, and I did it once, and it was, there were lots of questions coming. I was like, oh, turn that off. And I think if I were watching the news, that would really have me in a bad, anxious place, right? So part of my control is I cannot control what's going on out there, but I can stay home and I can stay safe. But not everybody's situation is that. Essential workers don't have that option. And I think they're in a much worse place because they are dependent on what other people are doing. So for me, I'm checking the source. I'm checking, there's a lot of researchers blogging. I also thought the concert that they had the other night was really interesting. They had a lot of top infectious disease specialists saying there's not a drug and we won't have a vaccine for a year. And they kept repeating that over and over again. And that was helpful for me to hear from the experts, I think.
Great. Well, thanks for that. We do have some other questions in queue, but unfortunately we're out of time. So we'll collect those and get back to the people that asked them. But we want to be respectful of everyone's time today. Jennifer, thank you so much. We really appreciate having you. We've got some chats coming in I'll share with you that just appreciate the information that you've put forward today. My email address is steve.mendez@redshelf.com. If you have additional questions, I can filter those through. And there is Jennifer's contact information there on the screen. So again, Jennifer, thank you so much for this time today and for your prep and tailoring this to our campus store manager community. I know that, again, that we really do appreciate it.
It's my pleasure. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Yeah, so we had one additional question about, come through chat. Is it possible to be too resilient? Is it possible to know when to give up? Or is it possible to not know when to give up or move on?
I have an article actually on that about coaching and failure. But it is important to recognize when you're failing.
Mm-hmm.
That's a really good point. Because sometimes people, they've sunk something into, say, a business and then they're not willing to give up and they're losing more and more and more.
Uh-huh.
So I do think it's important, if you can, to get a coach that can help you see that. So I would say personally, can you be too resilient? No. It's always good to be resilient, but can you be too resilient in a business and keep it going when you shouldn't? Yeah, absolutely. And that's just a very specific case for each person.
Yeah, and difficult, I suppose, when you see the environment changing so much that there may be options you could take advantage of that weren't there before, or an adjustment you can make to a new environment, and that might change the tide or the direction of the ship, and it might not be super easy to figure out whether or not that would work from your vantage point. So an outside opinion might be helpful.
Yeah, I would really recommend getting a coach. I mean, and if anybody's on here, I can recommend a great one. Kathleen Fanning. She's great. I've worked with her personally. Um, so, I think getting that sounding board, getting somebody to help is really good.
Great.
And I can send you a link. If that person would like the article, I can send them the article on and sort of how to go through the steps of analyzing that.
That's great. Sure, I can follow up with them.
Okay.
One other question, since you have a minute, thank you so much for that extra time.
Yeah, no.
I thought a great question we talked about as we were prepping for this. Now my mind is just gonna lose it. Oh, was what we'll remember out of this time,
Yeah.
and knowing from your expert opinion, knowing how we as humans will remember this, what is the one thing that we should focus on or sort of come back to every time, almost like coming back to the breath when you're meditating? What is the one thing we should be coming back to remember to do in order to impact that memory on the other side of all this?
Yeah, and I especially think it's connection,
Uh-huh.
right? And possibly the being kind.
Yeah.
And for me personally, the biggest mantra or thing that I'm taking through this is, what am I modeling to my kids?
Mhm.
Right? I'm in a stressful situation. And of course I lose it sometimes, but what am I modeling? Right? And that, just that kindness, and that, every time they're acting up, I'm thinking, this is hard for them too. They don't have words. They're missing their friends. So just for me, really not judging. It'd be easy to go, oh, my kids are misbehaving, or oh, this person's not responding to me, or here's a big one, this student just doesn't want to do the work,
Mhm.
right? And my job as a professor, I don't know what they're going through.
Mhm.
Um, and to me, just having this kindness and grace, and just, I don't know if they have a family member they're worried about, or possibly they have anxiety or depression, and that's something I'm really sensitive to. This is just rammed some people who or tend to experience it. They're really experiencing it in a really profound way. And just are my nudges, are my interactions helpful and
Mhm.
kind, or did it leave somebody feeling worse? So
Yeah.
really thinking about that, and seeing that long view, that we're going to look back and everyone's going to be like, oh, remember that was so much fun when we did our Zoom calls every Friday night. We're going to remember the good times and the connection. So I think
Yeah.
that's important to remember.
Yeah. That's great. And I've um, been introduced before to that concept of considering the situation of other people, even when you don't have the details about it. So maybe it's just one final point as we wrap up here. For someone who doesn't have your expertise and knowledge of the different parts of the brain and what state they might be in, or what's kicking in right now, is there a resource out there where someone can get deeper into that knowledge if they're managing people, that will help them come back to that orientation of their mind of I don't know what this person's going through, or being sensitive, as you said, to depression or anxiety? Is there anything out there that they can connect to?
Um, I mean, the key thing is being regulated yourself,
Okay.
right?
Nice.
A little mindfulness, a little meditation. And there's plenty of apps out there. I like Insight Timer,
Yep.
and they have some guided meditation. So um, I'm involved with Shambhala, and their retreats are wonderful. You can't do those now, but
Hmm.
they do have a timer. I mean, they do have meditations that are guided. And so if you have no experience, just listening to somebody else can calm you down. I mean, ultimately, you want to get to the one where you can sit and just focus on your breath,
Hmm.
and just be. Um, but I think those are great shortcuts. But just regulating yourself first, because if you're not regulated, you can't see any of those other things. And so I'd say that I'm trying to think of a book, or a resource. I mean, I do think Barbara Fredrickson's book Love 2.0 is a great one that talks a lot about the vagus nerve, and how to connect with other people. And she also has a website that has some meditation, some loving kindness meditations on it.
Okay.
If I think of something else.
What's interesting about your response there is that it feels like a lot of it we can regulate ourselves, and that power is within us, and we need to release it. So it's sort of insight.
That's the control.
Yeah. Right.
Right. That's the, like, you are in control of that.
Yeah.
But I want to be really honest, it feels out of control. In this situation, there are many moments that feel out of control, right?
Right.
So, but that's normal. So I think I don't want to tell people, oh, be in control. And then when they're out of control, like, oh, I'm screwing this up. That's not it. You're gonna fluctuate back and forth, but just being able to realize, oh, I'm getting really tight. I'm getting anxious. I'm getting upset. Okay. Just being able to recognize that is huge. And then going to a technique.
Right.
Sometimes you recognize it and you're like, I don't want to do that technique.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. There's some trial and error and figuring out what works for you. And I think what was a great takeaway for me today was that graph about the 40% of what we control in the positive thinking, and not giving too much, giving disproportionate power to the 10% of what you can't control.
Right. And I have found that all of the tips and tricks that I have been practicing in the past years are paying off huge in this situation.
Mm-hmm.
Right. One, I think all the meditation that I've done at Shambhala, the weekend, the being isolated, that's really helped. I'm prepped for this. Mm-hmm. Two, all of those tricks, I'm relying on them, and I'm able to keep like a buoyant view of what's going on. And of course I have times where I crash, but I'm able to come back fairly quickly.
Yeah.
So they definitely work.
Yeah. Yeah. And it has a cumulative effect as you build these things over time.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah. Wonderful.